everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us for this live stream event. My name is Rebecca, and I'm the event planner of Microsoft Reactor New York. Before we begin, I'd like to go through 2 items with you. Our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for our audience and our presenters. Everyone is welcome here, so please just be respectful if you engage in the chat. And then just some guidelines here as well. So this session is recorded. It will appear on our Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel with on-demand access probably in the next 48 hours or so. So if you're not able to stay for the entirety of the session, or if you're interested in checking out some of our other session content, you can find that there. I'll share the link to the YouTube channel soon. If you have questions, do feel free to drop them into the chat. If this is your first time joining us, you will have to create an account to access and engage in the chat, so just take care of that now. And then also, if you'd like to kind of follow along with the content that Gwyn is going to cover today, then you should also check in, which I had that up on the first slide, but I've shared that into the chat too. So just feel free to check in. There's event resources there for you that are helpful. And then closed captioning, you should be able to just at the bottom of the screen if you need to click on the CC if you're here with us on Learn TV. So today, we're once again joined by our regional cloud advocate, Gwyn, for the second session of her October series, which focuses on cloud admin. In today's workshop, we will be, or not we, because not me, but Gwyn will be managing virtual machines with the Azure CLI. So she'll show you how that all works. The session will run for approximately 60 minutes. There'll be time for questions throughout. And if you have not done so already, as I mentioned just before, please check in. So now I'm going to bring up Gwyn and myself. Here we go. Hello. Welcome again. Welcome back.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Excited for, this is our last, well, we're both on the same coast, East Coast. Mm-hmm. So, you know, last thing of the day. So I'm looking forward to the wind down.
I have dinner reservations after, so I'm like ready.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's something to look forward to. Okay.
Absolutely. But we got some exciting stuff to cover. Everyone in the chat, how are you doing? Let me know where you're checking in from. I got the thing pulled up on the side, so I won't miss any of your questions and comments. Rebecca mentioned this is the is this the second episode of this?
It's the second.
Okay, the second. I lose track of everything now. Yeah, so second session, we covered last week some RBAC things. We're doing some CLI VM management today. Next week we have, is next week VNets or monitoring? Do you know?
Ooh, next week is virtual networks.
Virtual networks. Okay, so we're going to learn a little bit about putting virtual networks together. In the last week to sort of finish everything off, we're going to be doing some monitoring. I sort of put all these topics together as an introduction to cloud administration, which is personally my background when it comes to cloud computing and cloud engineering. And I think it's one of the most entry-level friendly spaces inside of cloud computing. So if you're looking to get into cloud, it's great to cover these areas. And yeah, do make sure you feel free to ask questions in the chat. Well, we try to keep it casual here. Rebecca is my partner in crime when it comes to these sessions. So I will be making sure to pay attention to the chat. I'm going to bring up my screen now, or if you could, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and I'll duck out. See you all in the chat.
All right, see ya. All right, so this is the GitHub repo that we're basing today's demos on. And I'm actually going to have 2 things open. So I'm going to have open the Azure portal. And if you're not familiar with how you can open the Cloud Shell, if you go into your portal, so portal.azure.com, and then you click on this little icon here on the top right, and you click on that, it's going to bring up what looks like a terminal. This is all based inside of your browser, right? And actually, you can click on this here, go font, do text size larger, and we can make this full screen. That'll be a little easier to view. I can zoom in a little more. Chat, let me know if that's large enough. If not, we can go larger, smaller, whatever. And then so we're going to be running all the commands that we visit from the GitHub repo on this terminal, which is going to go back and forth instead of covering all the theory and then the demo. I'm sure it's just going to switch back and forth, and I feel like that's an easier way to go through these kinds of things, right? So yeah, So the Azure portal is, fantastic as you click through deploying things and services and such. But, there's a lot of pains. And as you click through things and you're deploying things, just, clicking through those things adds up time. And, when it comes to cloud computing, it's all about automating things, making things quicker. So this is where your command line shines. If you have something like, if you're a Windows admin, Linux admin, you should have plenty of experience with using commands in terminal, in a command line tools, and all that kinds of things, and creating scripts to sort of automate your repetitive tasks, right? And in Azure, we actually have 2 command line tools that you can work with. You have the Azure PowerShell, which Windows admins tend to prefer, and then the Azure CLI. Linux admins tend to prefer this one. So you can actually switch if you go up here, Bash and PowerShell. So for either one, depending, whichever is your preference, you can do the same. You can write scripts to check the status of cloud servers. You can deploy new configurations, open ports and firewalls on VMs, and can SSH into a virtual machine or change the setting, things like that, right? But this specific session, we are going to be focusing on the Azure CLI. So all of you Linux-based admins. But anything that we do in this particular session, you can also do in the PowerShell version, right? It's just a syntax thing. It's nothing that's specific to one version. The other, it's really just a syntax thing, right? And again, that's what we're going to be pulled up here. Let's talk a little bit about what the Azure CLI actually is. So it's a Microsoft's official cross-platform command line tool for managing Azure resources. And you can use it on Mac OS, Linux, Windows, and from a browser. So we're using it from the browser. But if I opened up something like the terminal here, Windows terminal, I opened up Azure Cloud Shell, and then I could actually do it from here as well. I have to set my tenant there. Oh, we see? It looks pretty similar, right? But this is local versus done in the browser. And you have this option to do it on Mac OS, Linux, all those kinds of things. So this particular session, we're going to be focusing on the virtual machine command. So that would be VM. So let's start with doing something like creating a VM, right? And with the Azure CLI, every command will start with AZ. So you'll have AZ, and then from there on, anything that comes after, you can sort of work around with and work with, and depending on what you want to do. But it's always going to start with AZ. So if you see, I don't mention AZ, and it's just sort of like assume that it has to be at the beginning. And the VM command, so then it would be AZ VM, right? And the VM command is what we would use to work with virtual machines. So VM stands for virtual machine in the CLI. And then if we actually do, so for example, go in here in AZ VM --help, you can do the --help flag for really any command that you want to work with, or you want to look into the documentation. And when you're getting started, I highly recommend that you do this with every single command that you are looking to work with. So for example, if I did --help after AZVM, it's going to tell us what group it belongs to, which subcommand it belongs to, and all the kinds of things. Let me scroll up here. This is actually kind of slow. Let me see if I can pull up this. AZ login. Hold on. It might be the text size that's like making it. There we go. Okay, cool. So when you do --help, you'll see like it'll tell you the group, the subgroups. So the group is sort of like where the command belongs. In our case, it's going to be virtual machine. And then subgroup, it's okay, which group of commands that we have available to that group that we belong for the top level. So for example, we have AZVM, and then for subgroups, we have disk, encryption, extension, host, identity, all those kinds of things. And then if we scroll down a little more, let's scroll down a little more. We have commands that you can utilize with the groups. So for example, list, resize, restart, show, simulate, eviction, start, and that kinds of thing. And if we scroll a little more down, it'll tell us a little more. Some examples, which I always find pretty helpful. So for example, it says AZVM list, and it'll say place the CLI in a waiting state until a condition of VM is met with the AZVM wait and things like that, right? And you can also do AZ find and then type in some sort of sentence that you're looking for, and it'll give you examples depending on that, right? I'm gonna actually close this up because it's like really getting slow. I don't know if it's the font size that's causing it to be pretty hard to scroll in. Let's see. Let me make this a little larger here. All right, let me try that once more. AZVM --help. Yeah, that's a lot easier. So is that okay? Can everyone see that? I'm going to make sure this is set to text size large. There we go. It gets choppy when we set it to large. Interesting. That's some good feedback to give it back. Let me set this to medium. If I go like that, is that a little better?
I think it looks okay, but I guess we'll wait and see what the audience has to say about it. Oh, one person said yes.
Yeah, it's interesting that the font size would make it
Thanks, Evan.
go a little slow. I wonder if I can do it on here, if it's any better on here. I feel like I'm already logged in. Easy VM -- help. Let's see. Okay, that might be a better option for us. Let me scroll and make this larger here. Clear, easy VM -- help. That might be better. Okay, I think that's it's like a smoother experience that way. It's okay. All right, we'll try here. If I run into any issues, we'll like swap back and forth. And that's what demos are all about, having errors and debugging in real time. Okay, cool. So we were focusing on, let's go back on this one here. We were focusing on the VM. You're aware of how to bring up sort of documentation on each command. And some of the most popular subcommands, so like things that you would do with the virtual machine or the VM command would be, create, deallocate, delete, list, open port, restart. We're going to do a couple of these actually in this session. I really like, so if you go to the GitHub repo, I really like this CLI reference because it has every single command that you can utilize with the CLI. And I promise you, there is so much in here. Like, look at this backup, blueprint boards. When you click into one of them, for example, let's go into, I don't know, AZ DevOps. And then there's even more in there. And then you click into them, and then there's more in there and stuff like that, right? So if you're familiar with the command line, this is just the way commands work, right? So let's focus in on this AZ VM create, right? So we're right now at let's clear the screen, and we're AZ VM, and now create. So remember, we always start with AZ, then we're using VM because that's the group that we're focusing on, and we're using the create subcommand. So if we go back to the GitHub repo, again, we shared the link to the repo, right? This is going to be available. This is based on the Learn module that's up here at the top. I would highly recommend you do this after we're done with the session. I tried to summarize everything to fit it in hours worth of time. But there's actually an interactive environment, and it creates a subscription for you, and you can create VMs and not have to worry about having to delete them or paying any money, things like that. So definitely give that a try once you're done with this. All right, so when we use the AZVM create command, there's actually 4 parameters that we need to provide. Resource group. If you have worked with anything inside of Azure, you know that everything needs to belong inside of a resource group. A resource group is sort of like this logical container or folder where you would organize your resources or your solutions used typically by lifecycle. So you'll have app dev app environment - resource group or something like that. And all your resources will live inside of that. It makes organizing things a lot easier. Next, we have the -- name, which would be the name of the virtual machine. Pretty self-explanatory. Then we have the -- image, which would be the operating system image used to create the VM. We're going to use Ubuntu LTS just because it's the one that I always remember. And then you have location. And this is the region that your VM is going to be in. Now, do keep in mind, when you are using a resource group, it has a location to it. So, for example, mine was usually East US 2. But the resources that live inside of those groups don't necessarily have to be in that same location. The location of a resource group really only tells you where the metadata is going to live, which is important for you to know. But again, they could be in different locations, which is why you get the option to specify this. And whenever I'm using the CLI, I like to use verbose because it gives you more output in terms of the progress and things that are happening with the command line itself. Additionally, there are some useful things that I usually recommend you use is the --admin username. This is to provide an administrator account when you want to work with your virtual machine. By default, it creates one for you based on your username, but since operating systems have sort of different rules and different formatting, you're better off just supplying one. And then you're allowed to do that with this parameter. And then generate SSH keys. SSH is the tool that allows us to remote into a Linux virtual machine, which we're going to be creating in this one. It works by creating sort of this pair of files. One is going to live on your local machine. So in my case, it'd be my laptop. And then one is going to live on your virtual machine. And those two, if they sort of authenticate with themselves, then you can connect to the virtual machine. And if they don't match, then you can't. So they're placed on a .ssh folder on your local machine, unless you already have an id_rsa in your target folder on your local machine. Then it'll just use that one, or not, it'll create another one. So if we put all this together, we'll end up having something like azvm create. Oh, here's a cool thing. So instead of doing -- resource group, I can actually do -g. And let me actually show you why this is. I'm going to bring up the help documentation for the create. And if we look up here, it tells us that, where does it appear? Just a little more. I know it's one of like the top ones. Okay, so we see arguments, -- resource group or -g. It's just a shortened version. A lot of these have them. We have like the -- name has -n. Capacity reservation group has -- so it's like shorter versions. Now, usually I recommend if you're doing one-off commands, you're not scripting, you can use the short version. So we can do azvm create -g, and then we'll provide a resource group. Actually, I don't know. Hold on, az group. I don't know which resource group we can use. We can probably create one. Let's do that right now. Az group. We'll create this as CLI demo -resource group, and then we'll put this location in the East US 2 region. Okay, so, and then I'm also going to create an environment variable to save that for us. We're going to say resource group is going to equal CLI demo -resource group, and then we'll just echo this out. This isn't part of the demo. I should have done this before, but anyway, here we are. And we'll just echo this out. Perfect. Okay. So now we can do azvm create -g, which is the short version for resource group, and then I'm going to provide the environment variable that I created. And then the name of the virtual machine, which is the same as this, we're just going to do -n. We're going to call this VM01 and VM01. Remember, there's 4 parameters that we need to provide, right? And then now we need to provide the location. So -- location can also be just -l, and then would be East US 2. We also need to provide the image that we're going to be using, and then in our case, we're going to be using Ubuntu LTS. Ubuntu, did I spell it correctly? Yes. And finally, I said we're going to generate SSH keys so we can move into this remote into it once it's available, and then we're going to say verbose. And I also forgot admin username. We'll just set that to username. We'll set that to Azure user. And then we set verbose too as well. Yeah. So that's pretty much all the things that we covered in the GitHub repo. And since it's verbose, we get sort of this output like running, and we see that there's progress. If you don't have verbose, it's just going to be sort of like you're not going to see anything, and you're going to be like, oh, is something stuck or something like that. But no, it's still going. Dalvin says, glad I am catching you live. That's awesome. Thank you for tuning in live. And if you can't watch the whole thing, totally fine, because it's recorded and you can catch up on the rest later. Also, you can check in with the GitHub repo. It has everything that we're going to be covering in here. All right, cool. Also, like about this verbose command is that it'll tell you how long it took to run. So in this case, it was 33 seconds. I don't think that's like a very important thing to know, but I think it's like clever. Okay, so what I want to copy here is our public IP address. I'm going to just highlight that, copy it, because the SSH into our VM. So if I do SSH, we'll use Azure user, which is the username that we created, and then paste in that IP address, which is 20.65.118.252. And we hit yes. We are now inside of the VM. You see Azure user at VM01, right? And then this is full on Linux VM. So if I, for example, I'm gonna have to move back here and see some things. Like if we move into the etc directory, we can probably see some stuff here. Let's move into udev. And we could probably like cat out some stuff from the udev config, just to show you that it's an actual udev.config. Oh goodness, I'm doing this wrong. Cat, not car. Cat. There we go. Cat is to print the contents of a file out to the screen. Right, so we're in a proper Linux VM. We're going to actually install some stuff a little later, so we'll just get out of it and turn out, and then we can exit. But it's cool that we can do this all from the CLI, right? This is all happening within the CLI. You're not actually having to like move into or open something else or anything like that, right? So let's touch base with our GitHub repo just to make sure I'm talking about everything that I wanted to talk about. So yeah, we put all this together. You saw that we got JSON output. You know what I want to do? I'm going to do public IP, and then we're just going to assign it that value that here we go, and echo public IP. Fantastic. All right. That's just so I don't have to constantly remember what the value is. Environment variables are your friends, especially when you're working the command line. All right. And we've also connected to our VM with SSH, which was that SSH Azure user. And the other reason we can do this is because we created the --admin username parameter and we provided Azure user. If not, we would have to go and figure out what this is. So that's why this works. Next, let's talk about images. So we're using Ubuntu LTS, again, mainly because it's probably one of the most popular Linux images or operating systems that you would probably want to work with a server. But there are actually several other images that are sort of built, and there's also the marketplace on Azure with custom images. And you can also create your own custom images and upload them to the marketplace and use them for your own VMs and things like that, right? Now, there's this actually pretty neat command that'll show us the most popular images that are used, and it's like an offline, so it's pretty quick to use. And that is azvm image list. So if we bring this up, azvm image list, this is actually a cool time to show you the output parameter. So if I hit this, it gives us everything in JSON. Now, JSON is fantastic when you're developing, when you're scripting, because it's easy to work with. But when you're trying to read stuff from in the terminal, it's kind of hard to look at. So if you pair this with something like output table, you're going to see like a neater output here. And then also output can be shortened to this just -o, and then you have this too. So we see here we have CentOS, we have Debian, we have RHEL, we have Windows Server, we have Ubuntu Server, and those things like that. Now, this is an offline list, and this gets updated periodically, but it's not a complete list. Again, there's a bunch of images, and you could do something like azvm image list -skew, and then you would look for the ones that are specific to WordPress. And in order to get like an up-to-date real online list, you would have to use the --all. The only thing I warn, and the reason that I don't run this is because I know it takes like 5 minutes to pull every single thing, and we have things to get through, right? But give this a try as you're going through the Learn module, and you can see like a bunch of the images, and try to like not use skew. Just run the command with the -all, and you'll get a really like exhaustive list of everything you have to do. And then you can also query for like by location, which images are available in your location if you add the -- location to the command, right? So keep that in mind. Now, sizing is very important, right? Because you know, if you don't have the correct amount of memory or CPU under like the wrong amount of load, or it'll run too slowly to be effective and things like that, right? You might have noticed that when we actually used the azvm create command, we didn't provide a size. That's because it was set to us by default. And we could probably figure out what it is if we do az. This is a command I'll show you in a little bit. azvm show, and then we'll provide the resource group, and then we'll provide the name, which I think we said is VM1. And if we scroll up here, it's going to tell us what size the VM actually is here. So it's a standard DS1 B2, which is a default that Azure uses for when you use the VM create command. But what if we wanted to use a different size, right? Or what if we still wanted to figure out like what sizes can we actually use, because the sizes available depend on your location and the cluster that your VM is and things like that, right? We can actually use azvm list sizes, and we can use this to figure out sort of which one is available in our location. And when we create a VM, we can use the -s size to go ahead and tell us, you know, what's available and what we can use, like which size we can assign to that command. And we can also resize if we use the resize command. So the first thing since we've already created a VM, we can create another one, of course, but I would much rather just resize it. So to resize it, we have to use the resize command, but we first have to figure out which options we have available to us. And again, this is because of the location that your virtual machine is deployed in. If you wanted to use a size that's available in your region, or like somewhere else, it's not available where you currently are, where your virtual machine currently is. You'll have to stop it, deallocate it, move it, and then do it soon. But what we can do is sort of like, you know, be careful with the details. We can do azvm list VM resize options. Actually, I'm going to copy this because it's kind of long. So if I paste this into here and I do AZ, remember every command starts with AZ, and we paste that in there, and we probably have to do, oh, we might be able to do it there. Oh yeah, we need to provide resource group. Okay, and we'll tell it the resource group. Oh, we also need to tell it the name of the virtual machine, VM01. Yeah. So what this command we're asking, okay, for this specific VM inside of this specific resource group, can you tell me which resizing option images and that we can utilize, not images, sizes that we can utilize. But you also see like this is not, hold on. Let's do an output table. Let's pair this with an output table because it's kind of hard to look at. Oh no, I clicked it again. Let's do it once more. We'll do dash output table, and this should be a cleaner view. Here we go. All right, so let's try to resize it to something like standard. I don't know, standard. Let's scroll to the top. See, standard B1MS or B1S. Let's do that. So we can do AZ VM resize. I actually don't remember the full command. Let's go out here. So we need to provide the resource group, the name, and then just the size. Okay, great. So, whoops. Group is dash resource group dash name, which would be VM01, which is the VM that we've been working with the entire time. And then we'll do the size, which will say it's standard B1S. I think that one is one that'll work. I forgot to add the verbose tag. So we won't get complete output, but it'll at least tell us if it's running or not. Did I miss any questions? We have probably a minute or so before we continue. Well, before this finishes.
We have one just coming in from Pubble, which I'm about to share with you.
Okay.
There you go. So does the size need to be from same series, compute optimized, general, etc., or can it be any SKU?
Oh, okay. That's so if you mean in terms of resizing, it could be from anyone as long as it's available in the, if your VM's in a cluster, it needs to be available in the cluster. If it's a resource group, in the resource group, right? So as long as it's available, if you run this command to show you the options, and if it's there, you can use it. So you can change around the different SKUs. Yes. All right. So we resize this, and if we scroll up, it gives us the AZVM show output. And if we scroll down, we see VM size now is standard B1S. So remember, I think it was D1 or something. So now it's B1S. So it's worked. We're going to clear this now. Now, speaking about a lot of JSON and how difficult it is to read at, we can actually move on to the next part that I want to tackle is the query system and runtime information about the VM. And there are a couple of subcommands in here that I think are pretty helpful to someone who's sort of getting their feet wet with administration and CLI. So AZVM list will return all the machines defined inside of the subscription in your Azure CLI whenever you're working. So I'm working here, your commands are running within a specific subscription. If you wanted to run a different subscription, you would have to switch over to different subscriptions. So if I do AZVM list, I should have added a table there because it's a lot easier to look at. There we go. It's going to list us all the VMs that we have in every single resource group inside of the subscription. If I provide a resource group in here, it's going to show us all the VMs that we have specific to that resource group, right? So that's a pretty handy sort of query parameter that we can utilize. And I mentioned this already, that we've been using the -- output flag with a table, and this is to format the output in a way that's easier to read than the default JSON. Another handy one to know is the AZVM list IP addresses. If we bring up this here, AZVM list IP addresses, and then we provide, again, the resource group. And you can see there's a pattern here in terms of parameters that get asked quite often. And this is something else. This is something that we can also add output table, and it gives us like a nicely neat table of the public IP address and private IP addresses. Right. So if when you create your VM, for some reason you clear your output or you don't make a note of what IP address you had, you can utilize this command here. Let's head back here. Oh, and AZVM show. I think I showed this a little bit when I was trying to pull the size. AZVM show will provide the resource group again, resource group, and we'll provide the name VM01. And you see we got a bunch of JSON in here, right? Now, this is where you might want to become a little bit more familiar with how you can query through this data, especially because when you think of CLI, you're going to think of, oh, like saving certain like key value pairs or the value of a key to like an environment variable or something like that, right? And if you have to like search through everything and then just copy things, it's going to take some time, right? So what we can do actually is do easy. We can use something called, I think it's called James Path. I'm sure it's called James Path, which is like a built-in JSON querying library. Yeah, James Path. It's a built-in query language for JSON. So the way it works is you sort of provide this -- query parameter here, and then you tell it where to look into. So in this case, we want to reference the admin username. So I'll show you how we actually get to that. So we see we go through the JSON output, and then we see we have here OS profile. So it's like, okay, I know it's an OS profile. So that's the first value I'm going to provide. So it's OS profile dot what? OS profile dot admin username would give us the value here. Right? So if I go az vm show and I do -- query, and I put OS profile dash admin username, and then we'll do, I think that's fine here. It gives us the value of Azure user, right? If we wanted to get to something like, let's look something that's a little bit more difficult that has maybe like an array or something. If we go into, let's see, network profile now. Network interfaces. So you see it has a square bracket, so it means it can have multiple entries in there. So if I go into network interfaces, we'll go into like this here. We'll erase this. We'll do network interfaces, and then we'll just provide it the first one, which would be 0. And then we want it to get the value of, let's see, where was that? Is it down here? Up here? Oh, here. And then we want it to get the value of, I don't know, ID. Let's type ID. Oops, that network interfaces. No, hold on, we got the wrong one here. Where did it go? Network interfaces 0, and then we'll go into delete option, network. Am I typing this correctly? Let's go like that. Network interfaces. If we just provide every query there. Oh, did I spell that correctly? Let me see here. Let me see again. What happens if I just provide, for example, OS profile? Will it give us everything? Yeah, so our interface, unless it's inside of another, let's see here. Okay, see, okay, here's the mistake that I made. So I was just providing network interfaces, but there's actually a level above here that's network profile. So I'd have to do network profile dot network interfaces and then provide the actual one that we're looking for. So network profile. So if I write network profile, it'll give us that entire entry. If I do network profile dot network interfaces, it should provide us all the interfaces, but since we only have one, we'll get the same sort of output if we put in 0. Now, if I go into that specific index and then I say, I don't know, tell me the ID, and you see we'll get the ID of the interface. And if we wanted to get like, let's say, the resource group here. Now, when it comes to sort of us using this query library to like assign some data from this output to an environment variable, you could do something like output TSV, and then you'll see their output doesn't have the, oops, forgot the extra command there. You see we don't have the quotes at the beginning of the end, right? So then you could assign something like, let's see, resource, well, actually we'll just say like group is going to equal, and then we'll put the command within that. And then we'll say azvm show dash group, which would be the resource group, the same command from above. The name is going to be vm01, and then there's query network profile dot network interfaces. It'll be from 0, and then tell me the resource group from there. And then resource group, and that double quote, and then we'll just do O TSV. Again, -O is just short for -- output. We'll run that. And now if I echo the group, we'll see that we got that value saved in there. So again, these are sort of just like sort of tricks that you pick up as you're creating scripts and things like that. For very, very helpful to understand how you can query JSON. And this is just something you'll get more accustomed as you keep going through it. All right, we covered James Path. I'm pretty sure it's called James Path. I probably should have looked up how you actually pronounce it. Maybe it's like JMES, but I'm gonna say James. All right. After we have start and stopping your VM with Azure CLI, that's pretty straightforward actually. I might actually have some other VMs that we can do these because I don't want to, since we're going to be installing something on the VM that we created now, we probably could run this on something else. So let me take a look at what other VMs we have available. We can run some stop commands on that. We have CZVM list. We'll just provide a table here. And we have VM1 that's in Reactor CLI demo. So if I do AZ VM stop, and then from the resource group Reactor CLI demo, just resource group, and then we'll put name, and then we'll say VM1. All right, so it's firing up. Pretty straightforward. You just provide the stop, and we'll let that run in the background. Then we also have stop. We have start. I guess we could start the same one that we stopped. And then we have restart, and then we have delete. These are sort of like the most common commands that you actually end up having when you're dealing with the virtual machines, right? And oftentimes people ask, what's the difference between delete and deallocate? So deallocating is you're not necessarily deleting it, but you're deallocating all the resources, and you're not charged for any resources because it's also being sort of taken away from the machine. But this would be used like if you wanted to say keep a VM but not have it like cost you as much as if you actually had it running or you actually had it just off. All right, so keep that in mind. So let's head back here. Whoops, I opened my calendar by accident. Let's close that. And it looks like it was off. If we run, let's go back here. I actually have this get instance view, which will tell us if the VM is running or not. And it has a pretty neat query down here, instance view statuses, and it'll tell us the status of if it's running or not. So let's actually paste this in here. I'm probably gonna have to update some stuff here. Whoops, yeah, I knew it. Let's type it out the long way then. Let's do az vm get in dash instance view name, and then I think the only difficult part to remember would probably be this here. Query. So let's do az vm get, I think it's dash instance view, is it? Az vm get dash instance dash view. Okay. Dash instance dash view, and then we can paste in actually name. Group would be Reactor CLI demo, dash research group, and then the name is VM1, and then we'll paste in this query that we copied. And we'll see what it gives us in return. And it says VM stopped. Fantastic. Let me take a quick break here just to look if we have any more questions. Let's see. Clark asks, do you prefer to use Bash or PowerShell on the cloud share? Are they 100% equal in functionality, or can one do more than the other? This is actually something that we spoke about briefly at the beginning. It's really just comes down to Windows admins tend to prefer the PowerShell, and then Linux admins tend to prefer the CLI. I personally prefer the CLI, but mainly just because that's what I've used the most. So I'm more familiar with how like a Linux-based CLI would work, but they both can do whatever it is that you need to get done. They're both capable of the same exact thing. It just comes down to syntax, right? So yeah, keep that in mind, definitely. All right, so let's go. I do want to cover a few more, like installing some stuff, but we might be able to get through deleting because there's some VMs in here that I need to delete. If not, I'm going to get charged for them. I don't want that. So let's do azvm delete, and we'll delete that last one that we stopped. We'll try the group. I think it was Reactor CLI demo dash resource group, and then the name is VM1. And I think, I'm pretty sure this is going to ask us, hey, are you triple sure that you want to delete this? And we're going to hit yes. And then there's I think there's 2 more VMs I want to delete, and then we'll install Nginx and open a port and see if we can curl like the front page of the Nginx server on our VM, and then we should be done with this demo. So a few more minutes, and not a few more minutes, maybe like 10, 15-ish or so. depending on how long this delete command takes us. I'm not actually 100% sure. Let me take a look at other questions in the chat. Let's scroll it this way that I probably missed. Let's see. Not a question, but I find the resizing restrictions with respect to having and not having attempt to be a little confusing. It requires constant documentation reference as to what I can resize to. I would agree. I think, but I think that's more of an issue of like there's just so many like sizes out there for you to pick. I know people have come up with like clever ways of like, oh, use general purpose for this, use this or memory optimized for this kind of stuff. I always have to look that stuff up. I never know like what's my go-to for those kinds of things. All right, we'll do AZVM list once more. And I always forget to add that output table. But that is actually a great comment. Sort of like picture the trades that you understand, you sort of pick up as you go. It's like, there's just one of the things that you're just always gonna have to look up, in my opinion. I'm gonna delete the 2 and 3 too as well. I'll do. This is an example of one of those tasks that you could probably automate. Like you would provide a script of like VM1, VM2, VM3. It'll just reiterate over each one of them instead of you having to type in each individually. Did that already work? VM2? No, it didn't. Let's do show one more. VMlist output table. All right. I don't know what it stopped deleting. All right. Anyway, I don't want to get hung up too much on this because I want to answer the questions at the end. But we're going to install Nginx now. First thing we need to do is get the IP address, but I think I already saved that in an environment variable. So let's echo -IP public. I think I did a public IP address. I did public IP address like this. No. Anyone remember what I named the variable? I think it was public IP addrs. Oh, I didn't do that one either. All right, we're gonna have to queue it. Query azvm show group, and we'll do -rg name vm01. If we scroll up here, we should have the IP addresses up here. Now, you know what? There's actually another command that we could use. azvm list-ip address of the VM1, VM01, and group resource group. Oh, let's IP addresses here. Output table that I always forget to add. Here we go. Okay, here's our public IP address. All right, so we need to SSH into our, we'll do SSH Azure user at this address because we're going to install Nginx. If you're not familiar with Nginx, it's sort of this like lightweight web server. It's extremely popular, probably one of the most used, I guess, web server services, you could say, out there. So we're in the VM now. Let's clear this here. And there's actually a command in here that we can utilize. So we're going to run sudo apt-get. If you're not familiar with Linux administration, apt-get is sort of like where you get download packages from via the command line. So we're going to update that first, and then we're going to go run sudo apt-get and install Nginx. And again, because Nginx is so widely popular, it's like a pretty straightforward command. It's just like a one-liner here. I'm going to copy that, run that. It's going to update our apt-get, and then it's going to download that for us. And the cool thing about when you run this, it starts the Nginx service on our VM. So as soon as this is done, we'll just exit out of it, and then we can open up a port so we can verify that it's actually running. And the Nginx service itself, it has like sort of like a default page. Like when you create like, I don't know, like a Vue app or a React app or a Blazor app, there's sort of like a template already. And then when you run it, there's already something running. So like you can visually see something already. So it's very similar with Nginx. Let me go back to our chat, make sure I'm not missing any questions. I think we got them all. Yes. All right, great. We're almost there. This needs to finish downloading. What was that?
Sorry, there was just one other one from Clark. Did you get that? The Cloud Shell?
I think I
just
did. Let me double check.
Sorry, the private.
Do I prefer to use Bash or PowerShell? That one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got that. I personally prefer Bash just because I'm more comfortable with a Linux-based CLI. If I knew more PowerShell, I'd probably use the PowerShell version. All right, so the command actually finished. Everything's installed. Let me hit actually exit. We'll go back to our Azure CLI. I'm going to clear this. And with our URL, we could do curl and then just go to the IP address of the VM. Let's see if it's saved in here. Yeah, it did. Perfect. Well, this is going to fail because HTTP is exposed on port 80, and by default, Linux VMs do not expose port 80, so it's not open. But we have a command here that we can actually open it with. So we do azvm open-port, then we tell it the port, tell it to which resource group and which VM, it'll open it up for us. So let's do it for it. Well, I guess we can let it fail just to make sure it's not open. It definitely will not work, but we'll give it a second. Again, the way Nginx works is that it deploys the sort of static page for us on our public IP address, which is assigned to us when we create the VM. Come on, I want this to fail so we can go ahead and open the port. Come on. No. All right, I'm just gonna stop it. All right, we'll do azvm open-port. We're gonna tell it port 80 to the resource group, and then the name of the VM is VM01. I think that's all we need to do there. Let's take a second or two, and then for it to apply the actual change. So I do curl. It might give us an error first. We'll see then. But once we open the port, all right, cool. So we got some JSON data as the output. And then if we do that curl again, it might not work right away, actually. Yes, because the rule is still applying. Usually takes a minute or so. Let's go back here. But what we should be getting is the sort of this page, the static page that Nginx deploys. The one call to Nginx. It'll be HTML because that's how curl returns data to us from. All right, let's go back here. It's still trying, I believe. Let's go up here. Yeah. All right. Let's give it a second then, I guess, for it to try to pull something for us. Did we get all the questions from Learn, Pubble? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, everything so far. Thanks for checking.
Cool. Come on. VM0. Did I do the right one? Did I open the right one? I'm pretty sure I did. VM01. Yes. Still not working? Let's see. Let's try it once more. There we go. Haha, I knew it. All right, so just to double check, I did curl the IP address, and you see we returned the HTML of the static page of the VM. And that is all the commands I wanted to show y'all. We have about 10 minutes to answer questions, or if not, we can just sort of answer like any kind of questions. But yeah, do make sure you reference sort of that GitHub repo. It's like a bunch of things in there, and also the actual Learn module, like get hands-on with this kind of stuff. I personally think the command line is probably one of the coolest skill sets that you can sort of have, because the amount of things that you can get done within command line without having to click really anywhere else is insane. Also, once you get comfortable with things like, grep, with things like, pipelines and stuff like that, you can really chain together very, very powerful things. So do get hands-on with that kind of stuff. And yeah, Rebecca, you got anything to add?
Hey. Hello. Yes. Sorry, I popped this up for a second there, and then I was like, let me take it down. Bring it back up now. So thank you all for tuning in, for your questions. I hope we answered all of them. If you have more, you've got a couple seconds to tap them out. But in the interim, I'll do this little plug here. So join Gwyn again next week. We'll be covering more cloud admin. So next week will be how to configure virtual networks in Azure. So this is a month-long series all about cloud admin once a week. So if you are available and interested, feel free to tune in. I've shared in the link a whole bunch of links. So in the chat, excuse me, a whole bunch of links. So feel free to check those all out. The repo, our resources for this session, one of the Learn modules that this session is partially based off of, all kinds of good stuff. Also Gwyn's series page and also the playlist on our YouTube channel where you can find the on-demand of these sessions once they've been dropped, which usually takes about 48 to 72 hours after the session ends. Yeah, and then also I dropped a survey. So if you want to give us your feedback, let us know who you are, like a little bit about you, what sort of content you're hoping to basically get from these series and, future sessions with the Reactor program. And then if you're not familiar with us, if you're tuning in from, one of the many channels that we're streaming out to right now and you haven't known about Microsoft Reactor, hello, this is us. We have Gwyn here all the time now,
Hi.
which is fantastic. And plenty of other, lots of people from Microsoft and from the network that deal in Microsoft products and all kinds of other stuff too. Lots of content all the time, all day long, every day, basically. Just check out our calendar, microsoftreactor.com, to see more and get more from this program. So yeah, I'm trying to ramble.
No, I think we
give people time to ask
it.
questions.
Yeah. Come back next week, definitely. We have some VNet stuff.
We've got one.
We
Clark
do?
coming in for the win. Yeah, he's here. Let me pop it up there for a second. Give me one sec.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we're streaming across 5 different channels. And so sometimes gotta jump around.
Is AZ CLI and CLI syntactic topics for any Azure certification exams? I believe so, yes. There are perhaps like the developer focused ones, or maybe some of the, I don't know which one specifically, but you will be asked like, oh, what command could you utilize for this or that kind of stuff. You're never going to be asked to like type in the command specifically, but being aware of like, like the most popular one's probably your best bet. My recommendation with CLI knowledge in general is for every sort of tutorial that you follow that only has like it being deployed in the version in the visual like UI or the portal itself, try to do that in the CLI. Find the equivalent way of doing it in CLI, and that way you get hands-on with that. You don't have to memorize anything like that, but just be aware of like this is how you would actually approach it, right? Eventually, you'll know that like AZ group is for resource group, AZ account is for Azure subscriptions, AZ VM is for virtual machines, and you'll start learning sort of your own a dictionary, or not just a dictionary, but you'll start to know more and more commands and become more and more familiar.
Awesome. So I think that's
the last one.
Is now the last one, yeah. So
right,
thank
awesome.
you all. Thank you, Gwyn. Do check us out for next week. If you missed the previous session, it is on demand and available for watching. And until the next one, see y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.